Young and the Restless. Alan's evil twin exposed on wedding day to Traci. So last year, Traci Abbott, Beth Maitland, met Dr. Alan Laurent, Christopher Cousins, who was a good friend of her sister, Ashley Abbott, Eileen Davidson. And if you recall, Alan was also Ashley's psychiatrist and helping her through the DID crisis. They were friends in Paris even though they were both Americans. And then things take a turn when Alan realized his sociopathic twin brother, Martin Laurent, was impersonating him. He had even fooled Ashley into believing he was Alan. And then eventually, Alan and his evil twin got into a scuffle in Paris. There was a fall off the balcony, and it was presumed that Martin died. So we thought, but now it looks increasingly like Alan died and that is bad twin Martin who is with Traci and just proposed. The only other explanation is that it is Alan Laurent, but he's in the midst of a psychotic break, and behaving like his evil twin brother Martin. That could be a fun twist, but it's probably the simplest thing, and it's just that Alan is the one who may be dead and Martin is the one in Traci's life. The guy is a diagnosed sociopath who has terrible tendencies. And he's all around scary. Kidnapping plot twist. Martin's sinister game with Sharon and Phyllis. Traci thinks she's engaged to this nice guy Alan, but it looks like it's Martin who actually proposed. And who we now know kidnapped Sharon Newman, Sharon Case, and Phyllis Summers, Michelle Stafford. Fans were absolutely stunned this week when they saw Alan open up an app on his phone to monitor footage of Sharon and Phyllis in the old psychiatric hospital. I have to say, Martin being alive and kidnapping them wasn't on my bingo card. There's been talk ever since the fact that he died that whether it was him or not, but there were no real red flags until recently when you really look back and start to make a study of it. Now, if it is Alan, maybe he's conducting some ill-conceived experiment using immersion therapy to try and get Sharon and Phyllis to work out their issues, but I doubt it. This guy, presumably Martin, seems far too sinister while watching them on his screen. Looked like he was enjoying seeing them play his sick game and was chuckling as he watched the video feed on Young and Restless. Red flags and missed clues. Is Traci engaged to a sociopath on Young and the Restless? So chances are it's Traci dating Martin all this time, and it looks like he has thoroughly gaslit her, and she truly believes that he is Alan. And it's been going on since Paris. And if you remember, Alan said before that Martin was always really good at impersonating him and had been since they were kids. However, there have been a few red flags that some fans noticed. Traci noticed, but he was able to explain away. And he just keeps really being able to cover his tracks. Do you remember when Traci first brought Alan home with her to the Abbott mansion? He looked around the living room and said he just wanted to take it all in. And Traci said, "Well, you've been here before." And that's because Alan is close to Ashley, but Martin had never been there before. You know, so fake Alan made some excuses, and Traci kind of brushed it aside. You know, she was falling in love. She wasn't paying that close of attention. Alan needs a job? And another red flag is that Alan basically blew off work to be Traci's full-time boyfriend. You know, starting with when she had to go to LA for that meeting about one of her books. Alan was like, "Hey, I'll go with you." And then he kept blowing off all these professional obligations. As a matter of fact, since he started dating Traci, I don't think Alan's been working at all. He's just been a full-time boyfriend. The real reason, obviously, is that fake Alan can't do speaking engagements or professional conferences or treat patients. You know, there's no way he can fool fellow shrinks who all know his brother very well. And at some point, somebody would notice one of his patients might notice that there's something he's not saying right or something he's forgotten. You know, Martin just couldn't get away with it. And another huge clue is Alan said he'd quit his job and move to the US permanently to be with Traci after they get married. So clearly when Alan and Martin went over the balcony together, whether Alan died or not, you know, Martin seems to be in control right now. Maybe they both survived. And Martin just switched places, and he has Alan stuck somewhere that he can't escape from. If you remember that scene in Paris, it seemed to be Martin that died and Alan who survived because of their clothing. But the writers might have been sloppy or they initially intended that it would be Martin that died. Then they decided to rewrite it later and make him a villain or just ignore that part. Or they'll try and explain the clothing change somehow, but I think more likely they'll ignore it. The explosive wedding reveal. Unmasking the villain on Young and the Restless. So now we know fake Alan is holding Phyllis and Sharon at Havenhurst. And you know, maybe real Alan is locked up there or he's in a grave in Paris with Martin's name on it. I just don't think that he's holding Alan captive because he sent the hint to Billy Abbott, Jason Thompson, to lead them to where they were. And I don't think he would risk someone finding it if he had an additional captive. And given that Alan and Martin are from America and Alan said his brother has been a sociopath in treatment for a long time, maybe Martin at one point was a patient at Havenhurst. That's why he knows the place so well and why he chose it. Fake Alan seems to be playing with Phyllis and Sharon like rats in a lab maze. And then he also seems to be toying with Traci, which is terrible. On Friday, Nick Newman, Joshua Morrow, and Billy are going to rescue Sharon and Phyllis this week. But then no one's going to know the identity of the kidnapper. At least not for a while. So it could be that this stretches all the way until his wedding to Traci. We know Eileen Davidson is back filming as Ashley, so I think we're probably going to get a sweeps wedding for Traci and her fiancé, who does not seem to be Alan Laurent at all. Fake Alan gets away with dirty deed? And something may come out around the time of the wedding that causes either Sharon or Phyllis to realize, oh, this is the guy who took us. Maybe there's a turn of phrase that he uses that reminds them of the Riddles when they were being kidnapped, something like that. And I think he's going to be backed into a corner and exposed at the wedding. Then the real crazy Martin will come out. And of course, poor Traci will be horrified. She thought she found the man of her dreams. But he is not a dream. He's a nightmare. And a sweeps wedding that turns into an absolute doppelganger horror show would be high drama for Young and the Restless. So I do suspect Fake Alan is going to get away with the kidnapping for now. I think the cops won't crack the kidnapping case. Not that they're great at cracking any case. And then it's all going to blow up in another few weeks on Young and the Restless. The most beautiful day of Traci Abbott's life. After years of heartbreak, loss and sacrifice, she had finally found peace and love with the gentle intellectual Dr. Alan Laurent. The Abbott mansion had never looked more radiant. The garden sparkled beneath strands of fairy lights, and every rose in the yard seemed to bloom brighter for the occasion. Ashley had returned to Genoa City, proud to stand beside her sister, though an air of unease hung over her like a faint storm cloud. What no one knew, not even Jack, who was doing his best to be both father figure and proud brother, was that a dark secret was about to explode right in the middle of Traci's fairy tale. The calm before the chaos. The ceremony began flawlessly. Abby arranged the flowers, Jack straightened his tie nervously, and Traci, radiant in a soft ivory gown, glowed with happiness. "Alan," she whispered to herself, catching a glimpse of him through the French doors. "You saved me from loneliness." Alan, or the man she believed was Alan, smiled back, that charming old-world smile that made her feel like the only woman in the room. Yet something flickered behind his eyes, a coldness she couldn't quite name. Ashley had noticed it too. "He's been different lately," she whispered to Jack as the guests began taking their seats. "Ever since that conference in London. He's quieter. Sharper. Like he's watching everyone." Jack chuckled nervously. "Ash, this is Traci's day. Don't turn it into one of your investigations." But Ashley's instincts were rarely wrong. And this time, she was dead on. A stranger in the shadows. Just as the wedding officiant called everyone to attention, a figure appeared at the edge of the property. Dressed in dark clothes, he lingered near the gate, watching. When Kyle offered to escort him out, the man stepped into the light, and jaws dropped. "Alan!" Kyle breathed. The man's eyes were wild, frantic, but unmistakably familiar. "Where's Traci?" he demanded, shoving past the stunned wedding guests. "She's in danger. That man up there, he's not me." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Traci, frozen in place, turned toward the altar where Alan stood, his expression shifting from calm amusement to something far more sinister. Jack leapt forward, grabbing the man who had just arrived. "What the hell are you saying? You're Alan." "I am," the newcomer said desperately. "The man standing up there with Traci is my twin brother, Martin. He's dangerous." The crowd erupted in chaos. Guests stood, murmuring in confusion. The man at the altar, the fake Alan, smirked, his calm facade finally cracking. Evil twin revealed. "Martin Laurent," the real Alan hissed. "You told me you were gone for good." "Oh, brother," Martin said smoothly, stepping down from the altar with a mocking bow. "Did you really think a little restraining order would stop me? You always had everything, the reputation, the friends, the trust. I just wanted my turn." Traci clutched her chest. "What are you saying? You're not Alan." "I'm the better version," Martin replied, his tone dripping with arrogance. "I studied you, Traci. I learned every story you told him, every dream you had. I knew exactly how to make you fall in love. Tears welled in Traci's eyes as she staggered back. You've been lying to me. This whole time? Not lying, Martin said softly, stepping closer. Just giving you the attention you always deserved. Alan would have never had the courage to love you the way I did. Alan lunged forward, fury in his eyes. You manipulated her. You used my name, my life. Before anyone could react, Martin pulled something from his jacket, a syringe glinting in the afternoon light. Stay back, he shouted. You ruined everything, Alan. Everything. Traci's moment of courage. Panic swept through the crowd. Jack and Ashley moved in to protect Traci, but she held up her hand. Her voice, trembling but firm, carried over the chaos. Martin, listen to me, she said, stepping forward slowly. You don't have to do this. Whatever pain you've carried, whatever jealousy you felt, it doesn't have to end like this. For a brief second, his expression faltered. Traci's warmth, her ability to reach the most wounded hearts, flickered like a light between them. But then Martin sneered. You think you can fix me too, Traci? Just like all your stories, all your projects? I'm not one of your redemption tales. Jack lunged just as Martin swung toward Traci. The syringe clattered to the floor, rolling under a chair. Alan tackled his twin, the two men crashing through the floral arch as guests screamed. By the time the police arrived, summoned by Abby, the truth had unraveled. Martin Laurent had been living under Alan's name for weeks, having kidnapped his brother and assumed his identity to gain access to Traci's life. His plan had been far darker than anyone imagined. He'd intended to marry her, drain her accounts, and disappear to Europe before anyone noticed. After the storm. Hours later, the Abbott mansion was quiet. The police had taken Martin away, and Traci sat on the staircase still in her wedding gown, her veil torn and her mascara smudged. Jack sat beside her, his arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders. I can't believe it, she whispered. I thought I'd finally found someone who saw me. You did, Jack said softly. You just didn't know there were two of him. Alan approached slowly, his face bruised but his eyes full of compassion. Traci, I never wanted any of this to touch you. Martin's been unstable for years, but I thought he'd gotten help. Traci looked up, tears streaking her cheeks. You risked your life to save me.